Everybody, welcome back. So this is going to be episode 1 of a series I want to start that's targeted to the beginner tyer. You might have just got your first vise and you don't know really what to tie, what's hard to tie, what's easy to tie. So basically making a playlist of easy to tie flies that are maybe a little more modern twist on some of the older flies that like a woolly bugger, for example. In this video we're tying a fly that's very similar to a woolly bugger. It's even easier if you ask me, and we're really going to slow things down. I'm really going to take the time to explain everything I'm doing, the materials, some of the tools, and really just slow things down for the beginner. So I hope this helps a few of you. Yeah, we're going to get right into the video. So starting off with our materials, I'm going to take some time to explain each one of the materials and just some things about them that I would find helpful as a beginner that I thought was confusing. So first off, the hook. We're tying this fly on a Mustad R74. This is a streamer hook. This is a streamer fly, and we're tying on a size 8 hook today. Now, one thing to note about hooks is not every manufacturer makes them the same, and there's a couple other factors that go into hooks that are going to change the size and shape. So, brief note on hook sizing. The lower the number, the bigger the hook. The higher the number, the smaller the hook. So, a size 1 is much bigger than a size 10. And another thing that you'll see when you're, in a tackle shop, fly shop, wherever for the first time looking at hooks, you'll notice that a lot of hooks, or pretty much every hook, has some additional information as far as heavy. You might see 2x heavy, 3x heavy. This hook right here is a 2x heavy. And then you might see long, especially when looking at streamer hooks. So this is a 4x long hook, basically meaning that it's long. The shank of the hook is longer than a standard hook shank, and the heavy is the thickness of the wire. So this is a stouter hook. It's gonna be harder to bend out, things like that. So just something to keep in mind when you're looking at hooks and trying to understand what's what. I know it's kind of daunting, and another thing to keep in mind is there's no such thing as a gold standard, across companies. So one company's 4x long is going to be shorter than another company's 4x long. For example, this Mustad hook, the R74, is a 2x heavy, 4x long streamer hook, and the Gamakatsu S11 is a 2x heavy, 4x long streamer hook. The Gamakatsu is longer than this. So there's no one size, there's no standard across hooks. But that's the hook for today. And then we're going to pair that up with a 5/32 Cyclops bead. Not much to talk about there. You can find some charts online to sort of roughly match up what bead is for what hook, but in almost every time video, the tyer or whoever is going to tell you what size bead they're using. All right, so moving on to thread. So in today's video, I'm using 6/0 Veevus in red. Thread is something that can get really confusing really fast. It was pretty confusing for me, but let's just, for the sake of today, stick to Veevus's sizing, right? So when you look at a lot of Veevus threads, it's going to be 6/0, 8/0, 12/0, 16/0 even. Now, just like hooks, the lower the number, the thicker and stronger the thread is. If I were to go in a fly shop and say, I only have enough money to buy 2 spools of thread, and I want to tie flies for trout, what am I going to buy? I'd get Veevus 8/0 and I'd get Veevus 6/0. That's going to cover most of your general size flies for trout. And another tip too is don't feel the need to buy every color of thread in every size imaginable. In a lot of flies, this is an exception, the fly we're tying today, but in a lot of flies, a lot of that thread gets covered by the materials, and you only ever end up seeing like the last few wraps when you finish the fly, or if you're building a collar on the fly. So it might be a good idea to get the general sizes in white. That way, when you're about to finish the fly, you could take a permanent marker, color in those last few inches of thread, and that way, you can, instead of having 16 different spools of thread, you can have 1 pack of permanent markers and 1 spool of thread. And that's just if you're looking to save a few bucks, you really don't need every color under the sun. There's definitely some colors I would have, once you get more established, like brown, olive, white, black, and even red. But that's just, I can make a whole nother video on thread. Leave something in the comments if there's something that you'd like me to spend more time talking about, or something that confuses you. I'll definitely get back to you either in the comments, or I'll even make a video about it if enough people ask. Now, moving on to our weight. I'm using lead-free wire in 0.015. That is just, 0.015 is just, the size of the wire. And one thing I want to say is you'll see a lot of different flies saying, oh, use 0.010, 0.020. This is the only size of, you know, wire I've ever had, and it's been fine. I think something that's really important to understand about fly tying when you first get into it, and it took me a bit to understand, is you don't always have to match the recipe exactly. Like even today, the hook we're using, I don't know if it's the original hook that, you know, the original golden retriever was tied on, but I know it's going to work on this hook, so I'm going to use that hook. And you know, if you have things that are close enough, oftentimes that's just fine. And as you use more materials, you'll understand that there's some similarities between a lot of them. You're like, all right, well, I don't have what this calls for, but you know, I have something similar. So you'll be fine with 0.015 if you go and get that. You know, it's weight. One thing too is I like using lead free. It's not as heavy as real lead, but I don't know. I just don't like, you know, you break off flies. I don't like leaving lead behind and putting lead in the waterways. So personally, I use lead free on all the weights that I use, but I'll leave that up to you. And then getting into the actual fly materials here, it's only two. So first off, we have Estaz in standard size, and not much to say about this. This is going to be the body of our fly, and the color is peach. So standard Estaz in peach. And then lastly, I'm using ginger marabou. Marabou is definitely something you're going to run into over and over again fly tying. It's used a lot for tails on flies, wings on flies. It's just a very commonly used material. And that's it. So now we get into tying this fly. All right, so once you get your hook in the vise here, make sure you put your bead on the hook before you put it in the vise. Since it's a beginner course, I'm going to go over absolutely everything. When you're putting on beads, make sure you put the small hole, put the hook point through the small hole so the big hole ends up on the back. That makes it so it's not going to slip over your hook eye there. Now, before we put our thread on, we're going to go ahead and take that lead-free wire, or lead wire, whatever you're using, and you're just going to lay down some wraps starting from about the hook point. And when you're using this stuff for the first time, I don't think I'm gonna have enough here. What you can do is wrap all the way forward, and I'm gonna show you a little, I guess it's a trick. Some people find it easier to put this on a spool. I do sometimes, but right now it's not on one. So what I'm going to do here is, since I don't have enough to make it all the way to the front, I'm going to come in here and slide it forward. And then I'm just going to take the rest of it, and work my way back. I end up putting quite a bit of weight on this. You can change how much weight you put on, but I'm going to run this down, I don't know, about till here. Now one more. Now when you go to break this stuff off, what helps is if you kind of helicopter it by wiggling it like this, and you'll see if you do it right, it snaps off nice and clean. Now what we want to do is start our thread behind our lead wraps. Now when you're starting thread, you make what's called a jam knot. So we're going to start it here, and you hold your tag in, as you can see, with your left hand, or right hand I guess if you're left-handed, and you're just going to take 2 or 3 wraps over your tag in. And you'll see if you have good tension on your thread's not going to slip out. So that jam knot is what starts our thread. You go and clip the tag in. Now we're just going to wrap over our lead here, our lead-free wire, just to secure it in place. So you're going to kind of cover it with thread wraps. You can see I'm doing here. I guess another quick note is when you hold your bobbin, you want to hold it right where I'm holding it here, and you're kind of using your palm. I know you can't see, but you're kind of using your palm to control the tension. You know, sometimes people grab it however feels comfortable, and it seems to work against them. So just when you first start tying, just grab your bobbin right here, and you kind of hold it so that you can use the palm of your hand to control how easily, almost like drag on a fishing reel, right? You're basically using your palm to create drag. Anyway, you're going to keep wrapping over these wraps. We're going to eventually make all this red, so you really want to kind of go crazy. And we'll clean that up after, but that's good enough for right now. What we're going to do now is get back to behind your lead-free wire, and we're just going to wrap back. Now one thing, we're getting into the danger zone here. You can see if I were to wrap straight, I'd hit my hook point. I'd risk breaking my thread. So it's something you'll get used to. When you go under the hook, you kind of pull it away and wrap back over, right? So you kind of take that travel path so you don't hit your hook point. Now, you use your hook as a measuring tool. You know, you have the hook barb right here. So if you want to make consistent flies, which it always should be your goal, you'll always either count thread wraps or use, you know, parts of the hook as reference points. So I'm going to stop just before my barb here. You see if I let my thread hang, it's hanging just in front of the barb. Maybe I'll go one more, like that. So that's where I know I'm going to tie in my tail right here. Speaking of the tail, you're going to go and get your marabou here. Now, I don't think my camera angle will let me show you, but one thing that makes working with marabou a lot easier is if you can get it wet. And instead of putting it in your mouth, you can make one of these. It's very simple. See if I can get it in focus here. All this is an old little fly tin. Shops will usually give it to you and you get a few flies. And just a kitchen sponge inside of it. And you pour some water in the kitchen sponge and it stays wet. And that's why I poked the holes in here so it doesn't get moldy and gross. But all you're going to do, I'll show you in a second, is we're gonna select our marabou feather here. You don't have to be too picky with these. Probably should have pre-selected this, but we're going to use this guy right here. Okay, so you can see this feather. It's pretty crazy, right? It's all, you got stuff flying all over the place. What you can do with your marabou, especially when tying tails, is you can rip the lower parts off. So it's just kind of the tip of the feather. And that's a big tip here, but I know it's tough with the, maybe it's that easier. So you can see it's all crazy, right? If I went to go try and tie this in, I mean, you could do it, but it's gonna be hard to measure. So all you do, it's gonna be hard to do it out here, is you take your little sponge thing and pull the feather under your finger, and that just makes it a little wet. And you can see immediately it's much easier to work with, and this thing's just a little wet. So what we're gonna do while it's wet is we're gonna measure out our tail. We want our tail to be just a little bit longer than the body length. So I'm not sure you can see that there. Just like that. That looks about good. So you're gonna you measure by pinching with your finger, right? You see my hand here. And you're gonna transfer that measurement right to the back. Right? So we measured it against our hook shank, or our hook, and transfer it right to the back. You come with your other hand and squeeze it, and we're gonna do what's called a pinch wrap. So what a pinch wrap is, you know, you can see my threads coming out from the middle of my fingers. So what we're going to do is we're going to come up, push that thread between our fingers, and you pinch the thread, and then you come down. When you pull down, it puts your thread wrap right where you want it. Right? So now we have our tail tied in exactly where we want it. And then once you do that, just take a couple securing wraps. You want good tension. You want to, you know, nice tight wraps. And then what you do, you'll see me pull my marabou forward between every wrap. That just stops it from wrapping around the hook shank. After a few wraps, we're going to cut it just short of our lead-free wire. Cut that free. And then I'm going to zoom you back in here. And we're going to tie over our wraps to clean that up. Now we're going to go and lay down that red base. We're going to make as much as we can all red. So we're covering up the marabou, covering up that lead wire. And you can take this opportunity, if your lead is thicker than your marabou, you can kind of even things out here. But it's not going to be a huge deal if it's not. And even if there's a little bit of lead-free wire showing through, not a huge deal. Just kind of keep running up and down your fly. And once you're happy with that, I'm getting close to happy here. run your thread to the back of the fly, back to our tie-in point. So then you're going to go and get your Estaz here. Now, one thing to note about Estaz is it is directional. You can see the tip I'm holding here. The fibers are pointing down and back, right? So you want to use this end when you're tying it in. Another thing is you want to make it easier to tie in, is you want to pull some of those fibers off at the end, so you have just your little core exposed, none of the fuzzy stuff. Now, I'm going to try and tie this in on the far side of the hook so you guys can see, but if you're tying it home, just tie it in on the near side of the hook. It's probably going to be easier for you. So what we're going to do is we're going to catch it with one thread wrap, two thread wraps. Is that in focus? And then you're just going to wrap over it, just like that. Nice tight wraps. And then, see where this little guy's sticking out? Rather him lay down like that. Make your way to the front of the fly. Now if you have a rotary vise, you can go ahead and throw a half hitch in. But I'm going to pretend most of you don't, because usually beginner vices are not rotary. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave our thread up here. We're going to grab our Estaz in our other hand. And you're going to be wrapping it in open spirals. And you're going to be pushing it away from you, right? So we're going to go the opposite direction of our thread. Our thread goes over the top of the hook and back towards us. This is going to go away from us and around the top. So as you do this, you can kind of comb these fibers back. But the most important part of this fly is that you leave a gap between spirals. You'll see what I'm talking about in just a second here. I'm not sure how well it's showing up on camera, but you can see my wraps aren't right on top of each other. That red is showing through. And definitely want to have that on your fly. So you just keep wrapping your way up to the front. And we're going to stop just about when your Estaz touches your bead. So for me, you can see it's on the near side of the hook, so you guys won't be able to see that well. But I'm going to tie it off on the top so you can see. What you do when you go to tie off a material is you take your thread. You're going to wrap the material past our thread. You can see, it might be a little tricky to see, but our material's made it past the thread. So what you're going to do is take your thread and take two wraps on top of the material. And then you're going to take your fingers and push everything back, any stray fibers, and take a few wraps in front of the material. This will really lock it in. Once you've done that, you can come with your scissors and cut your Estaz off close. And then we're almost done. So you're just going to comb everything back, and we're going to start building our collar. So you're just going to, doesn't take much. You can see I already have one going on now. Just kind of covers up your tie-in point and cleans up the fly and gives it a little hot spot. Alright, so now we're going to come in with our whip finish tool. Let's see if I can pull you out for a second and explain this. Where's my whip finish tool? Right here. So you can do it by finger, but these make very clean whip finishes. You'll probably get it in most beginner kits, beginner vice kits, and it's not super straightforward to use. So it's going to be a little bit backwards since you guys are on the far side of the vise. But what you're going to do here, let me see if I can get this in focus. This might be close here. Yeah, you can see that. So you're going to take this in your hand and hook the thread with the top of this. And then you're going to pull your thread towards you. And when you do that, it's going to fit in the little notch in the bottom. Alright, so you're going to hook it, put it in the notch, and then you're going to swing your hand out like this. And you'll see it makes a 4, right? So one more time. So hook, notch, 4. And you're going to go around the fly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then when you're done, or you're taking your amount of wraps, 5 or 6 is fine. You're going to slide it down. See the thread jumps off the notch. And then you're going to pull on with your thread hand, and it'll pull this right up. You slide it out, and you're good. It's okay if you trap some fibers in the whip finish. You can always trim them off later. See, it flies out of focus here. And then come in and just snip your thread off. And last step is just putting on a little bit of head cement. On all my trout stuff, I pretty much just use this stuff. Loon Outdoors water-based head cement. It soaks in really nice, and it takes a few minutes to dry, but if you just set the fly aside, it'll be dry before you're done tying for the night. Just put a couple dabs on there. Let that soak in. And that's your fly. The Golden Retriever. An awesome fly for trout, landlocked salmon, anything. It's just that perfect size where you could show up in almost anywhere and throw this and probably catch something. But yeah, thanks for watching. And you know, this is episode 1 of the beginner series. I plan on doing a lot more. And if you have questions that you want me to answer, definitely leave them in the comments section. I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks for watching.